Hey guys, my name is Andrew Perlott with Renaissance Humans. 11 years. 11 years of just eating raw fruits, raw vegetables, and a few raw nuts and seeds. And that came to a close for me at the beginning of 2016 when I began experimenting with including some cooked plant foods in my diet. And that's a long time to be doing something and then just make a change. And I've talked about it a little bit in newsletters and videos and articles, but I keep getting asked more and more about it. You guys want to know. And I've been hesitant because I see how things work on the internet. I mean, you say the least controversial thing, it gets blown up. And everyone wants to be definitive about things. They want to be like, here's the authoritative, this is how things are. And we're talking about something that it maybe didn't save my life, but it came pretty damn close. I was suffering horribly with colitis when I was in college. It's an autoimmune disease that trashes your digestive system. My intestines used to bleed and pus, and I had horrible pain and constipation and diarrhea and bloody diarrhea. And a raw diet allowed me to escape that, for which I will be forever grateful. So when I talk about me not eating an all raw diet anymore, and I still eat a lot of raw food, when I talk about this, I want you to know that it's not me saying that this is some bad thing that no one should ever do and it was a giant mistake and oh, here's how I suffered with a raw diet, because that is not the case. It is an awesome thing that changed my life for the better, but I am saying that over the last 2 years of me eating some more raw food, because I have been, more cooked food, because I have been very diligent and experimental and taking things incrementally, I have been able to find a way to include some cooked foods in my diet that allow me to largely escape the return of those colitis symptoms while gaining some additional benefits. And I've talked somewhat about what those are. Namely, those are improved general health and physical robustness, improved body composition, allowing me to manage my weight better because I used to be very overweight, um, and uh, yeah. So just doing better with the inclusion of a higher protein diet. And I want to be clear about that. I don't believe that it's actually the raw versus cooked thing, as I do that it's the high protein that is digestible and doesn't bring on my colitis symptoms versus a normal fruit-based raw diet, even with the inclusion of vegetables, which is low in protein and in my experience doesn't give you the same effect. That's not my recent experience. Um, so, where do I start about this? I've already talked about the science. The thing that I didn't, skate away from was the idea of talking about, the stuff that's very quantifiable. I can measure how much weight I could lift before and after. I can measure the moves that I couldn't do and now can in partner acrobatics. I can, talk about my weight loss experiments that I've tried. Uh, but a lot of it is subjective, and that is so prone to bias. I don't know. I'll see. I'll see how this video goes and where I want to go with it. I guess we'll get started with something. Uh, I started eating a raw diet when I was college, graduated, got a job, did that for a while, eventually quit that job, moved to Asia, and in 2011, I decided that I was going to start strength training because up until that point, I was running a lot. I want to say I averaged 20 miles a week, but the reality is there were often weeks when I did many more miles than that. And When you burn through a lot of calories, you take in more calories through food. And even if that food is low in protein, or like most fruit is, you will take in more total protein. So it's kind of like a buffer. The average non-endurance athlete doesn't necessarily get that buffer. And so when I stopped doing endurance running for the most part in 2011 and switched to strength training, I was still more physically active than the average person, doing a lot of things that were healthy for my body, and yet I started to have some problems, namely that I started to find it hard for the first time to manage my weight. I grew up obese. I was 220 pounds at age 16, gradually upped the ante, kept improving my diet, started exercising, went raw, still lost weight, got down all the way into the, I guess, like high 150s. I ended up losing about 62 pounds total. And then, as soon as I stopped running, suddenly it became harder. Now, here's the thing. You could just say, well, it became harder, Andrew, because you stopped running. Or you could say, you know what? Your solution to this problem is your variation. Because how did I find a solution at the time? Back in 2011, I switched more of my foods away from lower calorie foods like bananas and dates and apples and pears, which I really enjoyed, and switched them to higher protein foods like cantaloupe and watermelon and honeydews and several other higher protein fruits. And as well as even upping my green intake further than it already was. And this stabilized it. It brought it under control, but it didn't make it easy again. And I just did that for a number of years. It was still better than, I had been earlier, and my colitis was still under control, and it allowed me to strength train without all that running. And so I went with it, and it still worked, and I'd still help coaching clients do similar things, and I can't complain too much. It worked, but it wasn't ideal. I think that's kind of what it came down to for me at that point in time. And then years passed, and now we're up to 2015, and I decide that I'm going to look into this, because as I've talked about in my previous videos and articles, there's good research that says that when you lose weight on a low protein diet, you're going to lose a lot of strength and muscle. And by this point, I had gotten a lot stronger from strength training. So I ran a modest calorie deficit, maybe about 500 calories a day on average, losing on average about 1 pound a week. And over the course of a couple months, I found that I was getting weaker. Check out how scrawny I look in this picture. Now, sure, I lost fat, but I also lost a ton of muscle and strength. And it became very, very clear to me then that the protein balance point on a raw diet is a tenuous thing. And that, at least for me, as someone who was really into their play, into their strength training, that was problematic because, if you want to be lean and, and strong and not have to worry about that, that kind of becomes an issue. So by early 2016, I was ready to start experimenting with a higher protein diet, and I was able to do that. I've already talked about this in videos, not going to go over it, but processing legumes to be more digestible for me, and that worked, and I was able to up my protein intake, and I felt dramatically better. And suddenly, I could lose fat while minimizing the amount of muscle that I lost. So, in my opinion, even when I'm not losing weight, even when I'm not running a calorie deficit, my body composition is just better with more protein. So in my mind, that's kind of settled. Again, bias creeps in. We could all talk about how I could be mistaken about all this stuff, whatever, but that's my experience. So let's talk about bones. I've previously talked a little bit in some articles about how I think the science has changed over the years, and it has become somewhat problematic to just say that the RDA is even sufficient in protein for optimal health, but much less probably because most raw foodists are not going to hit the RDA. And I don't primarily work with people who are healthy athletes burning through tons of calories. Most of the people I work with as coaching clients are sick people, older people, not in the best health. And so to tell these people who are already primed for osteoporosis and sarcopenia, losing their muscle and their bone as they get older, to tell them to go on a lower protein diet just seems to me to be reckless, and that's why I've stopped doing it. Now, I want to be clear, I still suggest a raw diet for people who have various health complaints until they can kind of get to a stable place and then up their protein intake, particularly for people with digestive disorders. But I just don't think it's just on the available science a good idea, but beyond that, my own personal experience. Now, again, highly subjective to bias. We could point fingers at what I'm even about to tell you, and I was highly hesitant to even bring it up because who knows how it really worked. But in 2013, after I had stopped burning through all that those extra calories for several years and was now eating a lower protein diet, I broke my first rib. And then, maybe a year later, I slammed my thumb in something and I fractured my thumb. And then a year after that, I broke another rib. And all of that could be completely coincidental. It could also be that my bones were getting weaker. There's no way that I can tell. What I can say is that I had never broken a bone before that in my life, and since I've upped my protein intake, I have felt so physically robust. I have taken some major hits. I do partner acrobatics. I've had people fall on me in the most compromising ways. I have, my body takes a lot of abuse. I was riding my bike last fall and I got hit by a truck and I rolled out of it and some of the musculature of my shoulder got messed up and it's now fixed. But I survived that without a broken bone and I got hit pretty hard. So my point being that I am pretty strong and physically robust and I have never been so concerned about all those bone breaks in a short period of time. Again, perhaps coincidental, but that was my experience. It is something that I was a little worried about at the time, and it's still something that gives me pause whenever I'm talking about protein intake and whether or not a healthy, low protein raw diet is going to be optimal for bone health, regardless of whatever else it may be great for. Now, I have talked a little bit about how my athletic performance has improved. I have put on more muscle mass and I have gotten stronger than I have ever been in my entire life since I started adding more protein into my diet. I'm sure that I would have continued to get stronger on a raw diet, but there's no question that the gains that I've made and the adaptation to physical stress comes so much quicker. And my resiliency in the face of trashing my body has just happened. My body just goes through that process so much better. I adapt better to what's going on. And I have seen it in the moves that I can pull off. A lot of times it's like, if I can pop someone into the air an extra inch, that means that I can succeed, whereas otherwise I would have failed. And that extra strength is really useful to me. There's no question that I'm so much stronger now. And that, again, agrees with the research that we have. There seems to be an increase in strength and muscle mass up to about 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. I'm not telling people that they all need to hit that target. It's likely that a lot of the health benefits will come by 1.2 grams per kilogram. A lot of people on vegan diets are not going to want to alter their diet enough to hit 1.6. I think it's something to discuss, but just know that the data we have indicates that starting at the RDA, so certainly starting below the RDA, but the data we have starts at the RDA and it continues to show improvements in strength and health all the way up to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. And so eating somewhere in there, probably a good idea for people. It's been good for me. I know that people are going to want more information, and I inevitably will not have put the same information in the article that I will write accompanying this as I will in this video, so you might want to check out the article. Additionally, I know people have been asking me, what do you eat? And how do I up my protein intake if I don't want to eat just like beans, and all the beans, or whatever. So I'm going to do a couple videos going forward. I will also talk more specifically about, since I've already talked at length about how I process my food, my like beans, and pretty much prepare anything I'm going to eat cooked in a way to improve digestibility. I also have recently found a specific type of probiotic which has worked well for me over the past year or so and further improved my situation in the digestive realm. So I will be talking a little bit about that in a coming video. But I hope that this satisfies a lot of you guys who were looking for more information on exactly why I moved away from a raw diet. I understand there's a lot of die-hard raw foodists out there who are like, oh no, we lost one of our own. What can I say? This is my experience. This is what I have to say. I'm not hating on the raw diets. I have thrived on a raw diet in the past. I've done really well, and I think it can work well in some circumstances, particularly for the very sick and for people who are endurance athletes burning tons of calories. But I find that I'm doing better with more protein, and that's where I am. See you later.